Okay, I think we are connected now in Facebook Live. Some of you are checking.
The name of this particular thing is what? I got to look it up, but the subject. How have you summarised the subject? It's life after death or something. What is it?
Charlie, have you seen if we are connected in Facebook?
Yeah, Graham just wants to know what the title is.
What's the actual title? I think I just haven't got it here on the internet. Hang on, I'm looking for it. It's post COVID-19 what? Hello?
Hang on, I'm trying to find it, Graham.
Okay, on the poster, it says reflections on the use of wildlife in a post-coronavirus era.
That's it. No, it's not on Facebook.
No,
I don't think.
Reflections on the use of wildlife in a post-coronavirus era.
Normally in the video section, and there's nothing there yet.
Uh-oh.
Here we go. It's just come up now.
Right.
Okay.
Right. I've got it.
Okay. I'm going to mute.
Supposedly, we are connected. No? No? Shit.
Yes, we are.
Okay, good.
Ahora sí.
Recién aparecimos.
Perfecto.
What's painting on the wall, Charlie? Cambodia.
Good. Charlie, your phone.
Yes, Pablo.
You are mute.
We are connected.
Tapestry needlework. My mum still used to do them for her, and we have all the religious stuff happening here.
It's good for you, Charlie. It's good for you.
Regime before or after the scene? What's the sequence there?
No sequence. Hang on, I'll just Google it for you. Okay.
I believe we have 48. We have 48 viewers at the moment.
Okay, I think it's good to start.
Have you made me English-speaking viewers this time, will it?
Yeah.
How'd you work that out, Christine?
It's actually 29. At the top of the screen, there's a little eye that's winking at us, and it's saying there are 29 viewers on the Facebook page.
Oh, you got the Facebook page out. Okay.
Okay, for the people watching this, we are about to start. Stay there. Stay there.
Okay. Ready? Okay.
Yeah.
Graham?
You want me to start?
Okay. Let's do it.
Just tell me when.
Now.
Ready. Now.
Hi, I'm Graham Webb, Chairman of the IUCN Crocodile Specialist Group, and we are doing one of these webinar sessions that's being done out of Argentina with Alejandro and Pablo. And we have with us today, other than our guest speaker, who I'll get to in a minute, we have Christine Lepe, Charlie Manolis, we've got Alejandro, all deputy chairs of the CSG, and Pablo, who's deputy chair of the future leaders in the CSG. And we're here to hear the talk from Juan Carlos Vasquez, who is really quite an exceptional person in the world of conservation today. The topic today is reflections on the use of wildlife in a post-COVID era. And that is really, everyone knows there's been a lot of talk about trade in wildlife and its association with this COVID pandemic. And there's a lot of talk and not a lot of science and logic often going into this. And so Juan Carlos is in a very unique position to do this. He's a Colombian lawyer who did his postgraduate work in Geneva. He worked in Colombia as a legal advisor for rural development and indigenous people. He joined the CITES Secretariat, the Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species, in 1997. So he's had something like 23 years of experience in the real issues of trade in wildlife. And he's currently really responsible for a lot of different things, for legal affairs, within CITES, with legal affairs, national legislation projects, compliance, media and outreach, fundraising. There's a lot of issues within operation of the CITES Secretariat that Juan Carlos has his fingers in, and it's absolutely delightful to welcome him. We're old friends personally. We're all old friends with Juan Carlos. Welcome him personally, and so now I'll hand over to him to, let's see what Juan Carlos has got to say. Welcome, my friend.
Hello, everybody. Thank you, Graham. What an honor and a pleasure to be with all of you today. This is a quite exceptional reunion of knowledge here, and this will be more a conversation than a presentation. And I think I'm not selling anything, so let's take the time to discuss with the experts on our perspective of what's going on during this very special period for all of us. And I prepare a presentation that I would like to share. I will try to do that now. Perhaps you tell me if you can see the presentation.
Yeah,
We've got it.
It's coming soon. And thank you because we have in different time zones in Washington with Chris Lepi, in Argentina with Alejandro and Pablo, in Australia with Graham and Charlie Manolis, all experts on wildlife and with a particular focus on crocodiles, but not only. I would like to talk about the interactions of human and wildlife in this post-COVID-19 era. And as you are wildlife managers, wildlife management experts, perhaps you can also contribute when you feel the need to make comments or ask questions about this. And I will start by saying that COVID-19 is not an accident. It's happening for a reason, and it's the result basically of habitat loss and biodiversity and biodiversity loss as well. Habitat destruction and biodiversity loss, And of course, changing the tapestry of life will always have an impact on us. And this is one of the impacts we are seeing now, and it is not a minor one. But before I discuss that, I would like to start with this picture to dedicate this presentation to the Greek god Pan. I don't know if you are familiar with this god, but in the times of the ancient Greeks, Pan is the god of nature, the god of wild. And in Latin, Pan's counterpart is Faunus. And the words like panic comes from Pan because he was supposedly sometimes caused humans to flee in unreasoned fear. And when humans have fear, they make funny propositions, they suggest impractical solutions, they are basically emotive. And other words from Pan are pandemic, pandemonium, panacea, pantheism, panoramic. Pan means all. He was a god, is one of the few gods that was mortal, and was the god of fertility as well, and means everything. This used to say that nature is everything, and that and we are part of that. And as I was saying, I would like to continue with the Greek introduction by focusing on these three aspects of a presentation: the ethos, the pathos, and logos. And I think the debate now is on the pathos, on the emotions, on the heart, and we are seeing a jungle of articles and webinars proposing all type of solutions, advocating for the closure of wildlife wet markets, and appeals from permanent banning of all commercial use of wildlife, without thinking of the consequences and the scientific basis for this. So the media and the digital media as well, including social networks, are more on the pathos, which is appealing to the emotion of people, the feelings, to persuade, and they are often very basic and simplistic in the presentation of these arguments, and it's powerful because we will see we have a deficit of logos and of ethical thinking here, and that's what I would like to balance with this conversation today. We need logos, which means we need science-based discussions. We need to argument. So logos is also the basis for dialogue. We need to discuss, we need to dialogue, and this dialogue, this science, this knowledge is the one that will help us to fight fanatism. Because the problem with the emotions, when they are used in a wrong manner, like in last century, the Nazis appealing to the emotions, is that they may bring very negative consequences for humanity. So we need to balance the emotions with the logos, with the ethos, and what we are going to bring here today probably is some of this, some logos, some science, to understand what's going on and to explore responses to this crisis, which is a major crisis for humanity. And let me also remind all of us that this is the only planet we know of so far that is teeming with life. Life is possible on Earth just because one reason, and is that we are in the perfect zone in the universe, not too far, not too close to the sun, which means that we have liquid water. And this situation is being modified, altered by our lifestyles, the economic models that are followed. It's not everybody, it's not humans in general, it's the economic models that are operating in the world. And it's amazing because Humboldt, when he came to America, he was discussing more about his research in terms of studying the progressive habitability of the surface of the Earth. And Humboldt was the one bringing nature, the nature concept, and this idea of ecology, of an interconnected organism with human beings as a part of this organism, as part of biodiversity. And so the natural history of humanity is closely bound to our history. And this is what we are living right today. But 200 years later, we have a question to respond now is how did we manage to set up off all these change of events that will actually make our planet progressively less inhabitable? You know, at times we are destroying our habitat, we are losing habitat, we are converting the land, we are converting the planet. So this equilibrium that we have, this habitat zone where we are in the universe is not longer guaranteed. So I think that there is a need to reflect seriously about that, and it's not by quick fixes and magical solutions that we are going to do that. How we are destroying the planet, there are many drivers, including the demographic, the economic and technological aspects, the institutions and the governance, and the conflicts and the pandemics as well. And among the main drivers of this is habitat fragmentation, the overexploitation of wildlife. And this is where scientists, I think that needs to be more precise, because I'm seeing today scientists, experts on pandemics, generalizing and saying the driver is wildlife trade. And wildlife trade is like love. It could be good or bad depending on how you play in that game and on the conditions. So is the unsustainable use of wildlife, which is a driver, is not all the uses, because we'll see our fate, our destiny is to use wildlife. We are part of wildlife, so we cannot joyfully say tomorrow we are going to stop using wildlife. We'll simply disappear. It doesn't make sense in terms of the over 200 years of history of this human species as it is today, and of the 4 million years of evolution of nature. So we need to be more modest when discussing about nature. And there are clear links between biodiversity and health. There are these direct drivers like habitat fragmentation and encroachment into these areas where wildlife lives in an unsustainable manner. But we have also this problem of the population moving from the rural areas to the cities in the last 50 years in a massive manner. So these urban people is being slowly disconnecting from wildlife and from nature, and doesn't understand anymore how to interact, how to relate with wildlife directly. They are basically doing that through a medium, which is the television or the social networks or their smartphones, and they don't have real experiences with wildlife for a majority of cases, but they have ideas on what to do with wildlife and how to manage that. And this is the risk, that we may have all type of ideas in these times of abundance of opinions about what to do with everything. So talking a bit about the COVID-19, as you know, this disease falls into the category of emerging infection disease. And this is a category that will be growing, and it is an infection that is transmitted between domestic or wild animals and humans, and that's why we call them zoonotic diseases. And we need to, I'm talking about this because at some point I will mention the big problem and what to do with that, which is the One Health approach. Is that we need an inclusive One Health approach, where the health of the planet, the health of humans, and the health of wildlife is interrelated. But we don't have the wildlife managers and the wildlife authorities present in this debate so far. So we are missing a third of the conversation, and I think that in the future we will be able to fill that gap. So this is the two types of diseases, as anthropognosis and zoonosis, and the COVID-19 is a zoonotic disease, and we don't know yet exactly the reservoir, the animal that was transmitting the virus, the coronavirus, but many are saying that are the bats that are the origin of these viruses, according to the latest scientific bibliography research on this. Based on that, I think that we need to work all together, and CITES, the organization and the convention where I'm the secretariat I'm working for, we are joining forces, joining hands with other organizations to try to think together on what to do here. With FAO, with CBD, which is another convention, with CMS, with IUCN, with Traffic, with C4. There are 40 organizations there. I can name all of them now, but we are all trying to think together on what to do. And we were thinking that there are 4 guiding principles that may help reduce the risk of future pandemics originated from wild animals. And the first principle is to recognize the importance of the use of wildlife for many communities, including indigenous people, in all policy responses. We need to understand that better. Not only because they are using wildlife, but because they are a source of knowledge that is not available in the classic science that is informing policymaking in many countries today. The second principle is we need to maintain and restore healthy and resilient ecosystems. We need to maintain this living organism that is the planet, and we need to maintain that because we are living in this very unique zone in the universe that may be altered if we behave in a detrimental manner for the planet. The third principle is more a call for people that please don't blame the animals. That is something that historically humans have done since the initial myth when the snake was the culprit. We are always accusing animals of our bad things. So let's not find scapegoats. Let's not disturb animals. Don't persecute them, including killing, indiscriminate killings of bats that we are seeing in certain places because the people suspect that they are transmitting these diseases. And this is not going to address the real problem, the real causes, which are land conversion, habitat fragmentation, and unsustainable use of biodiversity. The fourth principle, and is the one that I would like to invite opinions from Graham, Chris, Charlie, Alejandro, Pablo, and others, is we need to regulate, manage, and monitor harvesting, trade, and use of wildlife to ensure that this trade is legal, sustainable, and safe. And this is an area where we have already legal instruments that are working well. CITES is 45 years old, and that are evolving to adapt to the new needs of the planet and the evolution of the economic policies, wildlife policies, and security policies, and health policies now, to make sure that this trade that happens is regulated. So we need more regulations for species that are not yet protected probably, to make sure that we are able to monitor that trade and ensure that this trade is sustainable, and this is done via the science, applied science. This is what we are doing for the crocodiles, and this is where we can show that it's possible to recover species from the brink of extinction by doing the right things, which I hope that Graham and others will be able to explain later during this conversation. I'm talking about the wildlife use because we are 7.8 billion today consuming biodiversity products every day, daily, without being aware. And even when we have a smartphone on our hands, this is coming from nature. Even if they call that the cloud is consuming a lot of energy, and for the smartphone they use the coltan, which is the mix of two minerals obtained from Congo. So everything is coming from nature, and many things are coming from wildlife, including wild animals. But the urban people that find food in the supermarket is not longer aware of the relationship that he has every day with nature and from very far places. Today, we are realizing some of this because we are seeing that it's the peasants that brings the food that we consume, and if there is not transport and not possibility to do that, we will starve. So we are starting to rethink. This is a wake-up call from nature to say, hey, guys, you are forgetting a few things. I am going to remind you what we need to take into account as part of nature. So we want to break this dualism as well, nature and humans. We are all together in one planet. So one health, one planet, one nature. That will be the message. And we are living in a period where ITBES, which is the Intergovernmental Panel Assessing Ecosystems and Biodiversity, is telling us that 1 million animals and plants are threatened with extinction. This is a number based on a model, but basically they are saying 25% of the biodiversity species are threatened. And we need to do something. And something is not touching, not doing anything, looking at other sites, but touching, managing, monitoring, regulating, using in an intelligent manner. And this requires a new knowledge and a huge experience as well from people that didn't have their degrees following Facebook or Google or social media, but that they were experts because they went to the ground and they know what they are talking about. And so some of these people is here with us today, and we need to respect those voices and listen to them more. So CITES in this story is regulating just the trade in 36,000 species. 97% of these species can be traded if this is done according to certain conditions. And we have over 1 million transactions per year, including many trading reptile skins and crocodile skins authorized under CITES. This is billions of money. This is rural development. This is millions in livelihoods for local people that don't have anything else to live. Just asking, are you listening? Is clear the signal? The presentation is broadcasting well? The sound, the connection is okay?
Yes. Yeah.
Yes.
Perfect.
Fine.
Perfect.
Thank you, because I feel like I say like I'm in a spiritual connection saying, are you there? Calling colleagues that and people that we can see, so we are talking basically to ourselves here. But just let me give you some examples of wildlife uses that we experience every day. The food is coming from nature. The very good food is coming from wildlife. Caviar, for instance, and many sources of proteins, fish, including wild meat, that is now the source of some discussions, including this, what they call these wet markets that probably we'll discuss later as well. But wildlife use is also all these antibodies that we are using for the discovery of the new vaccine for COVID-19. You cannot imagine the number of permit requests we are receiving today to trade biological samples to discover this new vaccine. Because we cannot discover a vaccine for the COVID-19 if we don't interact with other animals, wild animals, and their antibodies. And we know very little about the immune systems of these animals. We knew very little before about the immune system of bats and other animals, but I think this is another area where we need to bring together wildlife managers, veterinarians, and physicians, doctors in charge of human health. They need to talk to each other because there is a wealth of information and knowledge in the wildlife management that may be relevant for any health public policy after this post-COVID-19 era starts. So I see a role, a more prominent role for wildlife managers without leaving what their core work, which is managing wildlife, but also on all the information that can be obtained from wildlife. Not only for vaccines, we use wildlife for many things, including for manufacturing trains, and the mimetics, the architecture, the planes, aircraft, everything is part in nature. We use wildlife for housing, for the tables, for the floor, for the ceiling. We use leather and fibers, our shoes, our bags, our garment. We also interact with wildlife when we go to a zoo and we go to a safari, or when we have a pet at home. And we use wildlife when we perfume ourselves, when we use cosmetics. Wildlife is everywhere in our daily lives. That's why saying stop the use of wildlife is a discussion that should be balanced, not only debate us how horrible it is to use animals, which is an emotion, which is a legitimate emotion, but what is not legitimate is that I impose my emotion on others. And this become like totalitarian. This is the only way, and it's fanatic. I cannot even argue with these people. That's what we need to fight today. We need to fight fanatism, dogmatism, and we need to be able to dialogue using logos, science-based information to inform the deliberations, and we are losing that today. So we need to be very firm in defending the need for science and the knowledge of all the peoples of the world, not only the urban world and not only certain categories of people in the urban world. We are not many saying this, but I think that this is what is missing in this debate today. And in CITES, we have this pendulum, these discussions between banning everything, or talking only about illegal trade and criminal solutions, and we need more conventions to fight organized crime, etc. This is a health issue and this is an economic issue, and we need to fight illegal trade with all our forces, and we are doing that with other partners, including Interpol, UNODC, the World Bank, the World Customs Organization. But we need to balance this discussion, because we have other examples of illegal goods that are traded, and that despite all the investment on only one response, we are failing. And we cannot fail with the wildlife. We cannot lose our wildlife because we are going extinct ourselves. I mentioned this, the unique place on the earth for that purpose. We are a unique living organism. We are part of something bigger than us. So these simplistic responses that only benefits the criminals, because they are the ones that know how to play that game, or the simplistic responses from the general public that is not well informed and that we need to educate on these matters, are not helping to wildlife conservation. So we need to find an equilibrium, and this is very challenging, very, very complex in these times where nuance is absent of the debates, and you have to be bold and you have to sell things and suggest the magical solutions for everything. There is not magical solution. Nature knows everything. And what she's expecting is that we realize that we cannot continue in the way we were heading during the last 200 years, basically. And a reflection on this is much more difficult than just having a scapegoat, like killing the bats or designating the pangolin or asking for the closure of all the trade. These solutions may feel as good for a few minutes, but they are unsustainable. They are not going to solve the situation in the long term, because we are talking about the symptoms. We are not dealing with the causes of the problem. And as I said again, the main cause, the first one is land use conversion, habitat destruction, habitat fragmentation. And sustainable use of wildlife is also a problem. Illegal use is also a problem. But amalgamating everything to just come with the idea that we need to ban all wildlife trade, and scientists with a high reputation are saying this, health scientists, is dangerous. I think that we need to raise this point, because the policymakers and practitioners need to reflect more carefully on this. Take the time, don't rush. Even if there is an emergency, I think that we need to make sure that we understand nature better before we jump into decisions that will cause more harm than benefit. So what comes next in our perspective when discussing with this group of friends in this consortium that we call the Collaborative Partnership for Wildlife Management, CPW, we think, like many others, that it's time to invest in nature. We need nature-based stimulus packages for a greener and more resilient future. And we need to strengthen the cooperation, as I mentioned, between human health, veterinarian health, ministries of agriculture, and ministries of environment, or authorities in charge of managing wildlife. We need an inclusive One Health approach, which is not an approach, but we need to evolve in this approach to include the ones that are missing, which are the wildlife managers and the indigenous people. And think about the ecosystems health dimensions through ecological thinking and sound science. And we need to use these multilateral negotiations that are coming now, including the biodiversity post-2020 strategic plan, what is going to be discussed in the UN General Assembly in September, the climate negotiations, to introduce these new elements and integrate these ideas into those strategic visions, resolutions, and legal instruments that will be adopted. Just as a reminder, CITES is evolving. CITES was 45 years old on the 1st of July of entry into force. And we are global, we have 183 parties. It's a legally binding treaty that is science-based and combine the science with trade regulations. This is not easy to do. We are not perfect. We fail in certain areas, but thanks to CITES, we can say that 36,000 species are still there, and 97% can be used sustainable if parties and the users of wildlife follow the conditions that these wildlife managers are creating in different parts of the world. We have a quota and a permit system with trade controls, compliance, and the aim of this is to achieve conservation and sustainable use. So in this new era, we need a new science, and a new science that is not only on the natural sciences, biology, ecology, botanics, zoology, etc., but social sciences as well we need in this debate. And we need to fight the dogmas, the pseudoscience, the fake news more than ever. It's more or less like the media now trying to fight all these fake news that circulate in not trustworthy media. We need the scientists doing the same with all this information that is circulating that is labeled as science, but it's not science. We need to keep in mind the drivers, so the causes of this, not only the symptoms. We need to manage the risks that they will continue to be there. The COVID-19 will continue, and more coronavirus will come in the future. So we need to learn to manage these risks, and we need to understand the benefits of wildlife. We also need to evolve to modernize what we are doing today. We need to go digital, and that includes e-permitting, managing big data, exchanging the data among all the scientists and other wildlife managers, including health relevant information data. We need to promote this culture of compliance. Like all governments were trying to make all of us comply with this lockdown and giving us instructions. And if we don't comply, the policy doesn't work. So compliance is very important, and it's a calls upon the responsibility of each of us. We need to focus more on prevention, and we need to listen to the indigenous people and the local communities' voices more. They know better than us how to manage nature. I'm not idealizing them. They are humans as well, but they have a wealth of knowledge that will be relevant in the post-COVID-19 era for the new policies that will be adopted in the coming months and years. On the benefits of wildlife, I think that there are positive impacts on wildlife, is positive impacts on health. When you go to the forest, you feel good. When you see the trees, when you listen to the singing of the birds. So humans, animals, and ecological health are inextricably linked and need to be studied and managed holistically through this One Health approach. But wildlife also has negative impacts, health risks, like the risk of a pathogen that goes pandemic and kill many of us. So we need to manage that risk. We need to know better the immunology of the wildlife species, and because the roots of all immunology are in the wild. But we need to recognize that it's more the positive than the negative. This is important because when you start to say close everything, don't touch it, you forget all the positive sides of wildlife, all the benefits, not only in an utilitarian way. We are saying we are part of the same. We are also part of the biodiversity, but we need each other. The tiger needs the prey. It's a chain. We are part of a natural chain. So we need wildlife, and other wildlife needs us. So we need to stay in that cycle. Don't get out of the cycle and become all artificial robots, intelligent. That's scary, this proposition, and I don't think people is thinking of the consequences of what they are suggesting when they talk about this. Again, I will insist in this problem of disinformation. We need to fight that. The fake news, the pseudoscience, the magical solutions. This is not good. And even with the doctor, there is Hippocrates, I think, that says that if you don't do harm, don't touch, if you are not going to do benefit, to do well for the patient. So the same for us. Don't do harm with these magical solutions or with this disinformation. Let's listen to the scientists, to the wildlife managers, and let's try to frame this conversation, which is the big COVID challenge. Is how do we frame this problem? How we define the big ideas, these drivers, these risks? How do we put together the right messages, the principles? And how do we align what we are all doing? Because many of these organizations are issuing statements and saying things. So how we do a good mapping of everything that is available and order, calibrate these ideas to make sure that the general public understands. Because even this One Health concept, the general public doesn't understand what does it mean. We need to be able to communicate with the public in a more simple manner. We need to balance the messages. All emotions are legitimate, all the positions are possible, but using the logos. We are going to dialogue, we are going to argue and have arguments, not fanatism, not dogmatism. This is not good for nature, and this is not good for us. It's scary. And we need to think how we publicize all of this, and this is why I congratulate you for organizing this type of webinars, and this is why I accepted this. I normally don't participate in this type of things, but with you, I think that you are doing a great contribution to wildlife conservation by organizing science-based, practical conversations on these issues. And I think that we can work smart together on the next steps, including a new narrative. We need to update our chip as well. We need to change the language. We need to use better, to apply better the science, the one that is relevant for sustainability. We need to bring together the businesses, the local communities, the regulators, the health practitioners. And we need to use the technologies that are available and the best practices, business cases to understand this better. Just to end this presentation, I would like to comment on these calls for the permanent closure of markets where wildlife is sold or to halt commercial use of wildlife. I think, and I'm not alone on this, that these blanket injunctions that don't consider the socioeconomic and cultural impacts of these actions, nor the biological status of the species, if they are abundant or if you don't use the crocodiles, start to kill babies and to destroy crops, etc. And also institutional challenges of implementing such measures, because this can be very counterproductive. This is not helping us to do our job. And I think that without the adequate and locally appropriate alternatives to wildlife, locally, we need to go to the ground and see what's going on in each part of the world, not dictate measures from far from what the reality is telling us to do. To find this alternative to wildlife use and trade when you suggest, people suggest such bans that may have very negative consequences for wildlife when they lead to reductions of the perceived value of wildlife and may create these perverse incentives for land conversion. I'm going back. This is the key factor, key driver here. We may accelerate land conversion, so we'll destroy more wildlife by banning wildlife trade and withdrawing the incentives for wildlife conservation. So let's be aware of this, let's be careful and think of the consequence of all this, because poorly considered or simplistic responses may aggravate the crisis and lead to the significant land conversion that I mentioned, undermining food security and livelihoods for many communities, including the indigenous people and the local communities that are already under pressure, and only benefit the criminal syndicates that know how to play that game, and damaging the national economies of many countries that are wildlife dependent and under heavy pressure from the global recession that is coming. Thank you very much. And I'm happy to take some questions and to listen to the comments of the panel here. Over to you, Graham. Or I don't know who's taking over.
Thank you, Juan Carlos. That was an exceptional talk, and there are so many, so many things you mentioned that are, in my opinion at least, are totally correct. That you couldn't possibly even discuss them in a short time. You'd need a week to really cleanse them out. But some of the main ones to me that you're 100% right is science is the answer to this. Whereas in the environmental field for the last 25 years, people are saying, scientists, get out of it. You take too long, don't leave it to us activists. We can solve it. This is written, and this is what's happened. That there's not enough science in. So I agree with you 100% that science is just a key point. One of the other things, when you talk about use, that a lot of people only see the direct use, someone killing an animal. They don't see the indirect use, like someone clearing a forest to grow vegetables. You know, and that's it's like saying soldiers kill people, but airmen don't kill people, they drop bombs. And that's exactly the debate we're having here, that hunters kill animals, but all these people that never hunt, don't kill animals. They do kill animals. They're putting economic demands on to destroy habitats all the time, all the time. So we're all in it. And this needs to be really realised. Look, I just thought your whole talk was fantastic, but I could talk for hours about some of these issues. So thank you very much. Let me open it up to others. Alejandro?
Yeah, perfect. Thank you, Juan Carlos. An excellent presentation. I think you've been warming up in your Spanish presentation a few weeks ago. And I have to recognize you did excellent that time, but it's a little better now. So it's perfect. I think Graham just pointed very well that what is the situation. And we always end in the same, we always end in the same point. That is how is the best way we can communicate these things, because it's very easy for the people to interpret that killing an animal is bad, but they can easily see how many animals we are killing just living. So the communication strategy is basic in this kind of situations. How is CITES working now in these communication strategies?
Should I respond now?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Thank you. Well, CITES has been very cautious because CITES is a multilateral treaty and it's a party-driven treaty. So we are waiting for the parties to tell us how they want to handle this problem and what will be the role of CITES in this post-COVID-19 era. What we are doing, and we are going to publish a statement jointly with other organizations soon, where we started a reflection on how to balance this discussion and trying to highlight the key scientific aspects and how to join also the bigger conversation that is going on in with the World Health Organization, FAO, and the Organization of International Epizooties, which is the one in charge of animal health. So I think that we need a very solid response, and then we need to go for webinars, for podcasts, for op-eds, for you still having your newsletter in CSG, writing, but being more audiovisual. I think people is now lazy to read, so probably we need to communicate via podcast, videos, and short interviews. And I would like to have the opportunity to do the same that you are doing with you at some point, but I need to discuss with our communication team to see how we organize that. But I was going to say we have a role. I was looking at the Cinema Paradiso movie. I don't know if you have seen that movie. It's a beautiful movie. And there is a scene where they are cutting the kisses in the movies because there is a priest there saying, no, you cannot show that image. And they cut the kissing montage, they call that. And this is what people are doing now. There is censorship. You cannot mention wildlife use is a bad word now. Yeah, killing an animal sounds horrible. I'm not saying I'm not advocating for that, but I'm saying we are species as well. So we need to be more, and we are the rational one. So we need to use the emotion, but also the rationality and ethical. I think we need a new ethics of conservation. And it's an ethics when we take into account the science, when we see science as one nature, nature as one. We are part of nature. We are not outside nature. Nature is not an externality, which is something that the economic model has always explained as something outside the economic model. This is a problem. And the only ones that are saying it's inside the economic model are the ones that are attacked, because they are the ones using directly the wildlife. So this is a perverse narrative of the neoclassic economics. So there is plenty to do. We need to do that together. We are waiting for the parties to drive us on this. So what we are going to do is to prepare a document for the next standing committee meeting of CITES, explaining all the different elements of human health, transport of wild animals, wildlife trade, wildlife use, simplified procedures for using vaccines and trading in scientific sampling of this biomedical research. And the parties will tell us where they want to go with this.
Charlie?
Yeah, thanks, Juan Carlos. I think, to me, this whole COVID thing has brought to the front how important these visual things really are to people. You know, we can read about them in a newsletter, and it takes 3 months for the newsletter to come out. We can read them in the paper, but really being able to see people and see these sorts of presentations, to me, this whole initiative has just really opened our eyes just a little bit more. So I look forward to more of these coming through. At this stage, I've got a question from one of our participants. If you would like me to
Go ahead, Charlie.
give you that, let me just find it. It's quite a lengthy one. It is from Alvaro Velasco, who you probably know, Juan Carlos, our good colleague there. It's 97% of species protected by CITES. Few of them suffer actions from animal rights or organisations that recommend that we don't use their products. But some species are under excellent sustainable use programs and produce benefits to rural communities. And the question is, in your opinion, how can CITES help to demonstrate the benefits that are made to these communities and the species under these sorts of programs? Was that clear?
Yes, thank you, Charlie, and greetings to Alvaro, a good friend from Venezuela and a crocodile expert as well. I think that in law, there are sometimes some tensions between rights. So there are the animal rights people, and there are the communities that have rights as well, because the UN has recognized the rights of these communities. So we need to arbitrate on that and balance the discussion. CITES has a CITES and Livelihoods program where we try to highlight all these experiences that are unique, where communities, which I think empower communities, and we went with Alejandro, we did something with the vicuñas in Peru, we did something with the crocodiles in South America, there is the markhor in Central Asia, where we can show that when we involve local communities, the donor community, the authorities, and the scientists, and they all work together to find a solution, a long-term one. So the scientists don't come for one visit, but they stay there. There is a long-term change. And I need to praise here the crocodile specialist group for all the work you are doing around the world to recover all these species that were on the brink in the 70s. And now this is a conservation success. But it's not magical, it's not an accident. It's because there is work behind, there is an approach, and this is what you are documenting, promoting, and you are the engine of behind this. I always include the communities there. Without the communities, we cannot achieve any conservation results in the areas where we want to conserve nature. So I respect all the views. I need to say CITES is not an animal rights and animal welfare convention. CITES was not created for that. We have more elements of discussion in CITES highlighting welfare and animal rights aspects. We will need to think more about that. The societies are changing also as they are getting urbanized, so this is also a challenge, and we need to understand these evolutions, and we need a sociological understanding of this as well. But it's clear that for us, many of the wildlife that we are trying to protect happen in biodiversity-rich countries, in remote areas. The wildlife is not in Manhattan or in the central London or in Geneva. So, and this is where many of the people that is vocal on these aspects is based. I'm based here as well. So the only thing I'm suggesting, we need to listen and respect also the people living with the wildlife and decolonize this discussion on conservation. We need to listen to the people on the ground and not only listen, but recognize their rights as others see rights on animals, which is something that is evolving as well. We don't have any international instrument on animal rights yet, and CITES is not that one. That I need to be clear on that.
Yeah. I think to add to that, as Graham has always said, the biological variables associated with trade and management are usually the easiest ones to solve. It's some of these other variables, the economic and social and cultural and variables that are often the ones that are the most difficult to get over.
That's true, yeah. Wildlife management is a 90% human activity and 10% science.
Very difficult to leave humans out of the equation.
No, you're right. And many biologists really don't like that part of management. Yet that's the most challenging part. They're trying to, integrate all these social, cultural, traditional, economic, all these other variables. It's very difficult. Christine, are you there? I can't see your picture. Oh, there's you. Oh, wow.
Hi, sorry everyone, I suddenly lost sound and everything. Juan Carlos, absolutely fantastic presentation. Thank you so much for doing it again. And it's so comprehensive that you've covered so many of the issues that are out there at the moment and under discussion. I was really intrigued by the partnership discussions, the 40 different organisations, and the way that the thinking is going as well for this One Health, bringing in all of the practitioners from various sectors, the World Bank, from traffic, from the forestry people, etc., etc. Just wondering if you had anything anything else to add on that, given the discussions at the moment regarding how CITES should approach this One Health issue?
Thank you, Grace, and thank you for that question. Yeah, the CPW is this partnership involving the 14 organizations, some of what I mentioned before. And it's basically a group of experienced people with a shared interest on a pragmatic, science-based approach for developing, monitoring, and guiding joint initiatives for sustainable, legal, and safe use of wildlife. So we have big organizations like UNEP, FAO, are members of this consortium, and they are all developing aspects of this response. And CITES, I don't know if what you are asking me is about these proposals that are there to create a list of animals that may be risky for health. Or I think that there is an important thing here to keep in mind is that we have a sanitary regime. There are the sanitary measures, mainly in the ministries of agriculture for animals and plants, phytosanitary, sanitary, and the trade regime. And we need to understand better how these two regimes interact, because we cannot invent in CITES a sanitary regime and duplicate what already exists in another sector of the government. So what we need is to talk to each other. So before we invent things, let's talk to each other, make sure we understand what are the sanitary measures in place, see if there are gaps and we need to do more, see if there are animals that may need some protection, but scientists are already starting to say that a big part of the animals that carry this coronavirus are rodents. So we need to be more precise on when we talk about wild animals, we are not talking about everything either. So I think that on that part, we need to be more respectful of the sanitary law regime and see how it interacts with the trade regime. And the other part is on the illegal trade regime and see what else is needed. But I think we need more wildlife managers and more doctors, not more boots, to be clear here. I think we need a balance. We need all of this, but now what we need is more doctors, more science, and the proper level, optimal levels of enforcement that we are promoting is not new, and to have a balance between these things. So this is probably something that we are going to share with the parties. We'll see. We haven't had this conversation in the Secretariat yet because of all these discussions on the COVID and postponing the meetings and all that. But you will see, I invite you to keep an eye on CPW because they will publish this statement. And I think this will be the beginning of a series of collective thinking on what to do here in a practical science-based manner. And that will include developing guidance, toolkits, etc. And you probably will need to be part of this. So far, it's only Sully, I think, that is participating there. Dilys, Ro, and Shane. But I think that the work of the CSG is very relevant for this as well. So at some point, it would be good to have you in that conversation as well.
Sorry, yes, I do apologise. That was a bit of a leading question for a lawyer, but yeah, you deflected and handled that very well. Thanks, Carlos. But you're right. I mean, but also bringing in 40 different organisations is actually quite complicated because you have various disciplines involved. You know, you've got the United Nations looking at the environment, you've got the United Nations looking at development, you've got the United Nations looking at children. So you've got quite a range of focal points, basically, and foci for attention. So it is going to be a challenge. I will definitely be keeping my eye on that one. Yeah. Thanks very much. I really enjoyed your presentation. Thank you.
Pablo, if you got a
Yeah.
I
Thank
think
you.
you want me to answer or ask the other questions, Pablo?
Yeah. I have a question. First of all,
mute.
sorry. Thank you, Charlie and Graham. First of all, congratulations, Juan Carlos. You were fantastic again. I have a question from Nicholas Chu. He said, given the economic crisis caused by COVID-19, do you think, or if you have observed a trend, that there will be an increase in wildlife crime as more people turn to illegal wildlife trade to make ends meet?
Thank you, and thank you to Nicolas for that question. Yeah, the economic crisis will have an impact on wildlife. People will need to eat. So, and there are several reactions. First, people trying to use wildlife as a cure for the COVID. So starting to use wildlife as a source of meds. This is maybe a problem. And the other one is that with the source of income reduced, they may start to go and find wildlife, and with all the tourists stop, so there is a risk. I'm careful of the use of the term wildlife crime, because for me this has never been defined, and now everybody calls wild crimes everything. And for me, wildlife crime is the crime that is committed by organized syndicates for transnational big infractions against conducts that are punished by law, by criminal law. So the small guy going to hunt something to eat in the forest, for me, I don't categorize this as a wildlife criminal. For me, it's not wildlife crime. But it's up to each country to define that. So we are going to see people desperate going to harvest wildlife to survive. So we will need to think out, that's why we need to think out responses, because if the response is to ban, we will need to be able to enforce that ban in areas where the states, governments don't exist, don't have any presence. So this will be very symbolic bans, if you want. So again, local solutions for the local realities will be important, and identify when this illegal or non-authorized access to wildlife exploits, there will need to be harsh interventions there. I'm fully in favor of that. So we need just to avoid generalizing and assessing well the situation on a case-by-case basis to see how to handle this problem.
Okay. Carlos, if I could just respond also, there has been a response on the Facebook page from Dr. Alison Leslie, who is a Crocodile Specialist Group member, Regional Vice Chair for East and Southern Africa. And she has said that there's apparently an huge increase in poaching in South Africa, but many of the game farmers have said that they are ignoring this for smaller antelope and warthog, etc., but because people are hungry. But they're really just worrying about the rhinos and elephants at this stage.
On that same vein, Paulo Braga Mascarenhas from Brazil noted that in northeastern Brazil there are reports of overfishing in many water bodies. These are because people are now out of work. They've lost their jobs. And unlike Australia, where our government pays everyone, in many, many other countries, when you lose your job, you have nothing and you've got to feed your family. And so this is an example of where, increased fishing just to feed themselves, not trade. And this, of course, includes, in this case, caimans. So, I think the economy, the impact on economies is going to influence or impact wildlife in a big way around the world.
Yes. This is why we are insisting on the need for regulations, monitoring, and following the situation closely as a fourth principle, because this economic crisis will generate a lot of demand for wildlife in areas where people is starving. So it's almost wildlife for survival. And how we are going to treat this problem. It's not a CITES issue per se for us, because it's not international trade in wildlife. It's wildlife for domestic consumption. But this will be an issue, and this will impact the international trade at some point if these species are also entering into international trade, so that the population status and your work on science to see what's the dynamics, the decline on population because of that, will be something to monitor closely.
Juan Carlos, I'd just like to make 3 points, and I'm interested in your comments on them. One of the difficulties to me with the illegal trade is there's no, like in the rest of the law in most countries, like if you park in a handicapped parking space, well, it's illegal, but it's, nobody cares about it. And then if you murder someone, it is important and someone cares about it. But when you get to trade in wildlife, any single thing that's the slightest bit not according 100% to the legislation, which most countries, the legislation, most people ignore a lot of it, becomes a major deal in illegal trade. I don't think that the illegal trade becomes embellished by not scaling it to significance. Like a lot of illegal trade has absolutely no conservation significance at all, you know, and yet the way it's presented, every single bit of it is presented as though it was every, you know, grasshopper that someone took illegally from a national park is a major incident worthy of. So illegal trade, I think, needs to be clarified in the way you were saying with science and logic. The other point that I think is very important that a lot of people don't realise, and it's the power of CITES, and that when you have two species that have been restricted from trade, and the reality is most countries do not have anywhere near the resources just to devote to every species of wildlife in their country. They don't have them, they're never going to have them, they never have and they never will. So when you have somebody wants to trade in one species, but not another, to trade in that species, usually someone's got to invest a lot of money in that species to get a listing from Appendix 1 to Appendix 2. Then if they actually start trade and they want to sustain trade, that somebody's got to find resources to monitor and manage and to keep a check on what's going on and report what's going on. Whereas the other species that's not in trade just gets forgotten about completely and can disappear and like nobody cares about it. So one of the great things with CITES to me is it forces countries or industries to invest in the conservation, which would not otherwise occur. You know, most countries are saying, we can't put money to that. We need new hospital beds or new education, new schools. We need new health systems, new roads. Don't tell me we need to, you know, spend a fortune on the lesser speckled reed wobbler. But if you can turn around and people say, yes, but we can generate so much income and so much employment from that, the government itself is enabled to be able to invest in conservation, which doesn't happen automatically. It's not likely to. And just the third point, I know this is a mouthful, but one of the problems you are dealing with today, and you obviously see it all the time, is that you do have a massive industry now that's built up about the ethics of using animals and the ethics of doing this. This is a massive industry, billions of dollars every year raised by people, by public subscription to all these very heavy NGOs. And they package ideas for people. Most people in the public, 55% of the people now in the world are urban. It used to be about 30% in the 60s or something. Now it's 55%. They do their hunting and gathering in supermarkets. They don't know anything about nature anymore. They live in cities where nature's been destroyed. They're the people now that are given packaged ideas, like a packaged lunch from the supermarket. You know, that 3 seconds, yes, that it's all the bells, you know, ticks all the boxes. And now you can add slavery to it, and it make it even more appealing. It's a 3 second look. You say, yeah, I'll buy that and I'll put some money in. So you're actually opposing science and the use of science to solve these problems is a massive multi-billion-dollar international industry that in many ways daunts what, for a lot of countries, what the countries make out of wildlife. And I don't know how you get over that, because that is a massive education problem to me. The world is never going to go in that direction. You can't stop the use of wildlife. So they're on a problem. The best thing to make money is to be paid to solve a problem that's unsolvable, because it's going to go on and on and on and on and on forever, because you can never solve the problem. So this is what's happening now. When you look at this, well-meaning people, but they're sort of caught up in something that's just unrealistic. And I don't know how we come to grips with that in order to get rational, scientific, evidence-based management. You know, so just 3 comments. It was an excellent talk, and as I say, we could we could talk about these things for a week, you know, over a bottle of scotch. Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah, at some point I need to drink something. But and I hope this is the
1.5
beginning of a
meters.
conversation, and you will do more of this, because we need to continue this conversation and bring more people and more arguments. Not all, because what we did in CPW is there is a mix of interest and agendas. We disagree, so we should start inviting people that doesn't think the same things, because if not, we are preaching to the same converted church and we are not making a lot of progress. So it would be good to have debates as well and see all other perspectives. But you are making key points there, and I will echo that. Trade connects people. When you trade, you need to call, you need to ask for a permit, you need to trust. Bans, they disconnect, so nobody cares anymore, and countries abdicate because they ban, they say I'm closed, and I don't do anymore. They forget wildlife. And when you are banning wildlife in that way, I'm not saying that all bans are unjustified, you are saying something else. So you are promoting land conversion, you are promoting what somebody called the supermarketization of the food system. You are promoting other things when you are saying you are banning wildlife, and you are distracting the public opinion that is focused on the small animal, while you are allowing the big things going on behind. So this is what people need to be more aware now, and that probably will need another bottle of whiskey and a long conversation. But as we say, it's time to invest in nature. It's time for a green recovery. And even if it is not a priority for many countries, they will see that local people, what they need is that. Because now is when we are seeing the real situation of many people, that the only income they may derivate is from nature, from wildlife, from tourism, or from the use of the animals, etc. And finally, I will ask you this question, probably for our next conversation: is the use of wildlife stoppable? Can you really stop that? Can you really stop using wildlife one day?
You can't. You can't. If you go direct use and indirect use, the soldier and the airman, you cannot stop it. Everybody, even if they're having their veggie burger, are killing wildlife every day. You go to Aboriginal people who've kept all their habitat here. They've occupied the same lands for 65,000 years. They've been through 150 metres in sea level rise. The same lands, all intact. And you say to them, why don't you put in farmland? Like chop all the trees down, put fences in, kill all the wildlife, and start growing carrots and vegetables. And they look at you, they laugh. They say, well, why would you want to do that? That's what we do. That's our answer. We're not going to kill wildlife. We're going to eradicate it from where we grow vegetables, and then we're going to grow vegetables. And they don't like eating vegetables anyway. So, if you've been doing the same thing for 65,000 years, hunting and gathering and eating and maintaining all your habitats, why would you want to bring in something that changes all that? How could you possibly want to do that? How could you possibly make out that's wrong? And the people that are telling you that it's wrong are usually coming from big cities where there's not one bit of nature left. They've eradicated the bloody lot. They're all in little boxes up into the sky in cement. They've destroyed every bit of nature around them, and they're telling people who've kept their nature, oh no, you're doing it wrong. You're doing it wrong. 65,000 years, they're doing it wrong. Yeah. So there are a lot of very big questions here that don't make any sense. This is just cherry picking things. But you're right. These are big issues, and they need to be talked about openly, frankly, not with all the suave, straight to the jugular vein of the problem, because poverty is the world's worst problem for the environment. But the The problem is to solve the poverty problem is on a scale of hundreds of years, whereas wildlife conservation problems are 10 years. So there's a mismatch. You can't have a conservation problem here that needs to be solved now in 10 years and say, I've got the solution. I'm going to change the way everyone thinks. That's only going to take me 2 centuries to solve the problem. That is a mismatch of science, different levels of resolution. So we need things that'll work now, and that's to explain to people, because they think if they keep going for this, it's going to solve the world's problems. It may in a couple of centuries or something. I don't think it will be. But very interesting discussion. You know, there's plenty more of these we could have, I think. Great stuff. Every bit of it.
Well, great words to summarize all the discussion, and really thanks for making the time and the space to discuss this. This is one of the positive things of this new reality. So I hope that we'll be in touch and we'll connect soon again. And if you think about communicating, collecting information, developing responses, please join the bigger conversation.
Yep.
Okay, I think we can do this on a weekly basis now. So, too many things to talk and too many very important that we can develop. Don't worry, we are not asking for a weekly basis now, but thank you very much, Juan Carlos, again.
Thank you, Juan
Thank you,
Carlos.
Juan
Thank
Carlos.
you.
Okay. Thank you, Juan Carlos.
Hey, ciao.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Time to catch some Zeds.
Put your
Thank
mask.
you all.
Good
Leave it
night.
to
Good night.
other work now.